Hello, everybody. Welcome to another exciting edition of Info Nuggets with Amy. Today we're going to be talking about how to access the Ancestry Library Edition from home, and also how to use census data to build your own ancestry tree.
Info Nuggets with Amy. Time to go on a journey. So join her to learn online. Free knowledge if you have the time. E-books to genealogy. So visit SJC Library.
I love my theme song. I'm going to play that every opportunity I ever have for the rest of my life. So welcome. I'm very glad that you all are able to join us here today for our Info Nuggets with Amy Ancestry Library Edition. So the way that the format of this particular show works is that it is an info nugget. It's just a quick look at how to do a very specific type of task. And in this case, we're going to be looking at census records, specifically just census records, on how to create our family trees. Feel free to go ahead and type your questions in the chat box as we go along. I will answer them at the end of the presentation, only because it's very easy for me to go off on tangents. So I'm trying to stick to our 30 to 45 minute schedule. And this is also an apt reminder. If you have not yet filled out your 2020 census information, go ahead and do that now. It's important for a variety of reasons, but I particularly like it because I like the idea of thinking about like 100 years down the line in the future, people will be accessing our information on the census records that we're filling out now. So, census records are a fascinating topic. Let me go ahead and switch to a different screen really quickly. And let's go to here. So let's talk about, first of all, how to get to the Ancestry Library Edition database. So we're starting off here on our website. Again, that's the sjcpls.org. We're going over to eLibrary, hovering on that, clicking on databases, and then we're scrolling down a bit. We've got 30 million databases to go through, but since they're in alphabetical order, it's right at the top of the list, Ancestry Library. And you will get the screen where it asks you to go ahead and type in your library card number. When you go ahead and do that, type that in with no spaces. And if you are, there shouldn't be any more problems. We were having some problems last week with access where you would have to hit the enter button instead of the login button. That should have all been fixed, but if you do find that you have some problems, feel free to go ahead and reach out to us. And again, if you find that your library card that you used to have might not be active anymore, you can go ahead and get one of those free instant e-card numbers. And we Ancestry Library Edition is normally only accessible from home, but due to the really kind people at Ancestry Library Edition, they have gone ahead and allowed our users to access this from home at no additional charge to us until at least the end of May. After May, I don't know what's going to happen, so you want to do as much research as you possibly can right now. This is a good time for it. So let's go ahead and I'm on the wrong button. There we go. Okay. So once you're logged in, this is the screen that you will see. There are a couple of different forms that I'd like for you to be aware of before we actually get started. These are ones that I use myself. And it might seem like overkill at first or like a lot of paperwork, but if your memory is anything at all like mine, it's very important to write stuff down or type it down because 2 days from now I'll forget what it is that I found on somebody. So it's so much easier if you just, as you're finding new information, go ahead, write it down, cite it in your sources, etc. So the first one the one that I recommend that you can use on a computer, or you could print it out if you want to. You could save it digitally or print it out. It's a 5-generation pedigree chart, and this is a PDF where you can just click inside of it and you can type information in each one. And I believe that Miss Margaret is going to go ahead and put some of these links up in the chat box for you as well. So this one's a five generation pedigree chart. Another one that I really like is a family group record. This is extraordinarily useful as a template to help you realize what you don't know, so you know what type of records that you might want to look for. And this family group record is for just one specific family. If you think of it like in macro terms, macro, you get a big picture here with the 5 generations, then you bring it down a level to a specific family. And then another one that I use is an individual worksheet. So you're bringing it down even a further level to a very specific person where you're looking up information just for them. And what I love about the individual worksheet is at the bottom, they have a place for census records, so you can track their movement over the years. And this is also a good reminder where as you're going through and you're putting information down for somebody, this is like your little prompt, like what do I need to look up next? Okay, I found everything in 1910. What other censuses do I need to do? So it's a great way to help you remember what records you need to look for. So these are the 3 forms that we're going to be using today. And really quickly, some information about the federal census. As you know, it comes out once every 10 years. There are more than just the traditional federal census. Many states have completed their own censuses over time. Sometimes they were doing it even prior to statehood, and sometimes they just wanted to track their own growth. And this is a list, this is on the official census site, of all of the different states with all of the various state censuses that they've done in the past. The person that we're going to be looking up today lived in Florida, so this lets us know there were also censuses in 1825, 1855, 66, and so forth. The thing about some of these dates is that not all of them are complete. For instance, when I was doing the background research on this particular person, I was trying to find her in 1855, only to discover that what's left of the Florida State 1855 census is only for Marion County. Every other record, something terrible has happened to it. So all that's really left is for Marion County. So while this is a good clue for what other censuses to look for, be aware that they might not be complete. Some other information, unfortunately, between 1790 and 1840, the federal census was only collecting the white male head of household names. Everyone else was just a hash mark. So it gets really, really tricky to find people beyond or prior to 1840. So this is a very helpful census worksheet that kind of helps you figure out the math of the age ranges, genders, and races of different ancestors that you might be looking for. And this one, I believe Miss Margaret is also putting into the chat box. Another good link, and this is from Family Tree Magazine, there are different census schedules that were used over time. So there are special census schedules that you can be aware of that you might also want to take a look at. Most of these, I believe, are available through Ancestry Library Edition. Some of them you might need to go to outside sources. So there were, that's funny, they typed it in morality. It's not morality schedules, it's mortality schedules. So mortality schedules, Native American schedules, agricultural, manufacturing industry, and unfortunately slave schedules, veterans, and the terminology is terrible. That's what they called it, defective, dependent, and delinquent schedules. So if you don't find somebody in a federal or a federal census who's supposed to be there, you might want to look at some of the other schedules to see if something else might give you some additional clues. So we were starting off on our main screen. The person that I'm going to use today as an example is a very interesting lady. She was Anna Gardner Burt. She was the last owner of the Peck house that's on the corner of St. George Street and Treasury. I've been doing some volunteer work for that organization, and what struck me about this particular lady is she makes for a very great example for the censuses, because she kind of stayed put in the same place for a very long time, and it makes it easy for us to kind of walk through what different census information we might find. So the house itself, built in 1750, initially the residence of Juan Estevan de Pena, but in 1837, purchased by Dr. Seth Peck, and Anna Gardner Burt was his only survivor, his granddaughter, and she left the house to the city of St. Augustine when she passed away in 1931. So we're starting off with some very limited information. I know her name, I know where she lived, and I know where she died. And honestly, sometimes that's all we have when we're doing our own ancestors. We might know their name, we might know where they died, or we might not know what year they were born or where they were born, and that's okay. So you don't have to have a lot of information to get started with your genealogy. All you need to do is, for census purposes, is to find an ancestor who you can get to at least 1940. That is the most recent census schedule that's available to the public. The federal census has a 72-year rule for privacy purposes. For instance, the 2020 census information is not going to be released to the public for another 72 years because they do want to protect your privacy. But what that means is that we have to wait an awful long time to find older censuses for genealogy purposes. So the most recent one that's available to us is 1940. 1950 will be released in 2 years from now, 2022. So get ready for that. 1950 is coming out. But anyway, when you're doing genealogy with censuses and you're starting from yourself, you want to get at least to an ancestor in the United States in 1940, because once you get to that point, then you'll be able to explore all of the further or the previous censuses that came after them. So with Anna Gardner Burt, I know that she died in 1931, so that means I'm going to be looking for her in the 1930 census. And to get to the censuses, we're going to click on search, and we're not going to do all categories. We're going to be very specific with our searches today. We're going straight to census and voter lists, clicking on that, and we're going to go straight to the U.S. Federal Census Collection over here. Click on that, and we're going to even look for a very specific census, so we're not entering information yet. We're scrolling down to the bottom. And we're going to go looking specifically in the 1930 United States Federal Census. So let's take a look here. There is a lot of information that we could fill in. If you have seen the previous show I did on this, we're not going to put in too much information because due to indexing, sometimes too much information bogs it down a little bit. So we're going to put in what we absolutely positively know. We know she was Anna Burt. I don't know what year she was born, any of this. I know she lived in St. Augustine. I don't know if she was born in St. Augustine, and I'm not even 100% positive at this point in my research that she died in St. Augustine. Because remember, there's a big difference between where you die and where you're buried. A lot of things can happen in between. But all I know for sure is that she did live in St. Augustine, and that was her name. And I'm going to click here on search. And this is where things get really exciting. So when I first did the background research for this particular one, as we'll see, she isn't coming up in our list of results. And at first I was like, okay, that's interesting. Let's go ahead maybe and narrow it down over here on the left under our search filters. We can go from broad, we can go to the country, to the state and adjacent states. I'm going to go to that level and click on update, see if we can find her. And again, I was doing this from home, and I still wasn't really finding her. I mean, there's a couple of Anna Burts. Here's one right here, but she's in Hillsborough. No, that's not quite the county that I'm looking for. And I was looking at each of these, and soon it became abundantly clear that she wasn't showing up in the list of results. And as a librarian, I love it when I don't find answers right away because that's part of the challenge. And this is also useful because it's a great illustration how don't get frustrated if you don't find your person right away. Every once in a while you have to do a little bit of digging, and Anna has made this one special because she wants us digging right at the very beginning. So I know she's alive in 1930. I know that she's very likely in St. Augustine. why isn't she showing up in the list of results? And you are going to come across this very same problem where you have your little hidden ancestors who are purposely trying to make life difficult for you. So I'm going to show you how to browse through a census record when you are like 98% certain that this person is here. They're just not showing up on the index. Because indexes are not perfect. They are often very fallible. All sorts of different problems can happen. And in this case, this is exactly what has happened. There was an indexing error, so she's not showing up in the list of results. So this is how I found her. I started off at search. Again, I went to the census and voter lists, and I started clean. Instead of doing a search, we're doing a browse, which is completely different, a little bit more, well, okay, a lot more time consuming, but it gets us an answer. So again, we're starting off with the U.S. Federal Census. And again, we're scrolling down to the date. We're looking specifically for the 1930 Federal Census. But this time, instead of doing the search over here on the left, we're going over here on the right to where it says Browse this collection. So we're clicking on State, Florida, County, scrolling down to St. John's, and remember, over time, county boundaries change. So as you go back further and further, I mean, even state boundaries change. It would be very helpful to have maps with you as you're doing this, so as you're going further back to make sure that you're looking in the right places if you have to browse. City, we are going down to St. Augustine, and now it's going to pop up as a list of districts. There are many enumeration districts within St. Augustine, especially as different cities grow. This is true for anywhere, and in this case it's a matter sometimes of going through city by city, or I mean rather district by district, trying to find the right one. And I'm going to cheat for a second, jump ahead, and find out exactly what district it was that I wanted. Okay, that was 10. So I went through every single district because I was 99% certain she was living on St. George Street at the Peck house, so I had an address to go by. So I'm going through page by page looking at each of these. And over here on the left-hand side, they list the streets. So right here we've got Cordova. We're on page 1. I don't want Cordova. Notice here it's 1 of 15. I'm clicking this arrow over here. And I kept doing this, and sometimes your neck starts to hurt after a while because you're reading it sideways trying to get that street name. But I eventually, and I won't bore you with going through page by page, but I did eventually find her here. It turns out it was page 7 of 15. Let me pull this over a little bit. Where did she go? Here she is right at the very bottom. And you'll notice as I'm hovering over this, it comes up with surname Bent. But when we look at the handwriting, we will see exactly what happened. I mean, knowing that it's Bert, I can look at that and say, oh yeah, obviously that's Bert. But whoever was indexing this particular document had problems with the handwriting and put it down as Bent. And that's why Anna didn't show up inside of the index results. So every once in a while, you are going to have to go page by page through a city census, enumeration district by district, if you can't find the right person. I mean, this is if you know that they exist, that they were very likely in this place. It's very helpful to just look at the actual records and flip through them. Don't trust the index. So here we note, let's take a look at each of the columns because there's some really good information in here. So this is 1930. Right up here, this is the house number. So I know she's at 143 St. George Street. And yep, that's the Peck house. Dwelling number 87. What that means, the enumerator was going house by house. And so they're just counting off how many houses that they've visited. So this is the 87th house that that person has gone to. And this one is the, what is that, the family... Oh, the family number. So again, this is the amount of families that they've gone to, because sometimes you have multiple families living in the same house. So, and in fact, that's what's happening right here. We have Anna, Bert, and at this point, we're going back to all those forms that I've created over there. So we, for instance, we have our individual worksheet right here, 1930. We're going to go ahead and put in that she was in Florida. Whoops. that she was in St. Johns County, that she was in St. Augustine, and that she was, oops, I already forgot the number. That was what, 143? Yep, 143 St. George Street. So we're going to type that in, 143 St. George Street. And what I'm also doing over here in the family group record, I happen to know that Anna did not marry. She didn't have kids, so we're going to treat her actually as a child in this particular instance, because what we're trying to figure out are her parents at this point. So we have her full name. I know when she died. I don't have a place in here yet for census information, so we're going to leave it at that. Similarly, over at the 5-generation pedigree chart, I've got Anna's name here. I know where she died, the place of death, but we're going to leave it at that. So let's jump back to 1930. So it looks like she's got 2 lodgers. We've got Bonnie Chad and maybe Lena Crow. And it shows that Annie is the head of household. Home value, approximately $2,000, and this is in 1930. Is this a farm? Nope, it's not a farm. She's a female. She's white. She's 79 years old. So this is giving us some important information right here. If she's 79 years old in 1930, that gives us an estimation of when she was born. So that's when I get my calculator out. 1930 minus 79. She was born in approximately 1851. So there's my first clue. So I'm jumping back over here. I'm going to type in about 8. Whoops, something happened. Click the wrong button. My bad. Okay, so about 1851. And I'm going back to my other sheets. And again, I'm doing about because I'm not 100% certain yet. I know it's thereabouts. So born about 1851. And it's showing for marital status S, single. If she had been widowed, there would be a W there, which would have indicated that she had a spouse in the past who had maybe passed away. But since it still says single, it means she hasn't been married. If she had, let's see here, if she was presently attending school, no. Can she read and write? Yes. Let's see here. Now this is also important information. This column right here is telling me that she was born in Florida. So I'm going to go back to my other forms and type in all of these clues as we're going along. Born in Florida. Born in Florida. This is also interesting. It's telling me her father, even though I don't have his name, it's telling me her father was born in Vermont and her mother was born in New York. This is all information that I'm going to go ahead and put in. So, again, I'm treating her as the child in this one. I know her father, even though it's listed as a husband, that's her father, was born in Vermont. And her mother was born in New York. I still don't know their names, but I have some clues about where they came from. When you're doing one of these pedigree charts, you always start with the person right here, number 1, the main person that we're focusing on. Parents, father is always the one above, number 2, and mother is always the one at the bottom, number 3. Don't ask me why, that's just the way it is. So her father was born, the place of birth, P, is Vermont. And the place of birth for her mother, New York. Going back over here, what else do we have? Let's see here, we've got some different code numbers. Nothing is indicated in immigration or naturalization, which means, and especially since she was born in Florida, she was a citizen. She speaks English, she doesn't have an occupation, and she is not a veteran. Okay, so that's the 1930 census. And that was the one where we had to go page by page by page by page. Let me show you one that's a little bit less frustrating, because now that we have 1930, the next one that we want to go to is 10 years before, 1922. Or I'm sorry, 1920. So we are going to go back to the main search page. Hang on a second, let me see if I can go back this way. And we're going to start up another search. Did I go too far back? Yeah, here we go. Okay, so that was 1930. So we're going to do the same thing, except for this time we are going to say we want 1920. And we're not, browsing is sort of like a last or a worst case scenario, so we're not going to try that yet. We're going to do the straight up search once more. Was it Anne? Anna? Anna. Bert? I know she lived in, and here's the other thing. When you're typing in a location, sometimes, especially with St. Augustine, where you have abbreviations, sometimes you have to type out the word saint, or maybe it's the word fort or something like that. Just be aware that sometimes you have to be very specific with how you're spelling a location. So we're just going to do this. Anna Burt, 1920, St. Augustine, Florida. Fingers crossed. Click on that. Aha! Finally, she comes up in the index. So here in the index we have a couple of different places. Like here's another Anna Burt, but I'm showing her home in 1920 was Chicago and Illinois. Let's take a look at this first one up here. Anna G. I know her middle name is Gardner, and I know she's in St. Augustine. So let's click on this. We're going to click on View Record, and it will give us the full information, or full indexed information. Again, take indexing with a grain of salt because sometimes it's wrong. It's always better to look directly at the record. So I'm clicking up on that. We're getting to 1920. We're waiting a moment because my internet connection is a little bit slow today because I've got 30 million tabs open. And probably because many people are watching this fine program, I hope. Maybe not. And this has gone on long enough, so I'm going to click the reload button to see if we can get that one to come back up. And it's, oh, there we go. Starting to get a little bit of spin. There we go. Okay. And usually Ancestry Library Edition will helpfully highlight the lines so you don't have to read through them. Through all of them. We do have a little zoom feature over here on the right. This is super tiny print, so we're going to keep zooming in. And there we go. That's better. So 1820, and look over here on the left. I'm still indicating that she's on St. George Street. We have the same thing. Her address, house number is 143, so she's in the same spot. So I'm going to jump back over here. 1920. We're going to type in the same information. Florida, St. Johns County, St. Augustine, and she's at 143 St. George Street. Oops. And then and so far we haven't gotten anything else yet for the other sheets. Okay, so back to 1920. Okay. So here we go. We have Anna Burt. She is in the house all by herself. There's no lodgers this time. There's nobody listed as living with her. Her relation, she's head of household. She owns her house. Let's see here. Free or mortgaged. It looks like it's an M for mortgage, but I know the house had been left to her, so that's something that I might want to follow up with. She's a female. She's white. She's 64 years old. I always double check the math on all of the censuses when it comes with age. So 1920, what was that? Oh, I see what the problem is. See, the index is 64, but when we're looking at it, it looks closer to 69. Because if we did 1920 minus 64, it means she would have been born about 1856. And the other census said she was born around 1851. So if we did 1920 minus 69, that's closer to it, 1851. So here's another example of where the index has failed us. And if we had put in very specific information in our search, like date of birth 1851, this record might not have come up because this record thinks that she was born in 1857. So again, sometimes you want to leave out a lot of information when you're conducting your search because the indexing might be throwing you off. Okay, marital status, single. She can read, she can write. She was born in Florida. Father was born in Vermont. Mother is born in New York. That's jiving with everything that we found so far. She speaks English, and her occupation is owning a house. Interesting. So there we go, 1920. Now we're going to conduct the same searches. We're going to keep going backwards. So we've got 1920. Now we're going to go look for 1910. I'll save you the process because I already found it. We'll wait a second for it to pull up. 1910 census for Annie Burt. In my head, she's Annie. Okay, Anna Burt. Now this is interesting. Okay, so first of all, it says they're on Cordova Street at number... Well, this is all very interesting. So it's showing that Mary Peck is on 143 Cordova Street, and Anna Burt is on 162 or 161. Something is strange here. So, and it also lists that Mary Peck is the head of household and that Anna is her niece. So, this is showing that Mary is Anna's aunt. And considering the difference in surnames, it's probably a safe assumption that Mary Peck was Anna's mother's sister. Had it been her father's sister, it very well surname might have been Burt. Now there are other things that happen, and that might not be what the case was, but looking at the surnames, that's an assumption that we can go ahead and make, especially since Anna never married. Since this was her maiden name, and this person has a different last name, this is either her mother's sister or an uncle's wife from her mother's side. So this is our first clue, especially since it states the relation that Peck is another surname in this family that we want to investigate. Now right now, with the forms that we presently have, it doesn't really leave a place for aunts or uncles, but this is something that I would want to note, that possibly the mother's last name might have been Peck. Mother's last name might have been Peck. Sister might, sister or sister-in-law might be, and so far this is all conjecture, so we're sticking mights all over this. We're 1910. Might be Mary L. Peck. So we're just making a note of that because that's another lead we might want to follow up on later on. And the house number, this might be an enumeration mistake. So it's not just that you have to contend with different indexing errors. Sometimes the person who was writing the stuff down didn't quite get it right either. That happens. 59 years old at this time, so I'm double checking with my calculator because I can't do math to save my life. 1910 minus 59, born in about 1851, so this all matches up. Again, I'm showing that Anna was born in Florida, her father was born in Vermont, her mother was born in New York. This is still good. She speaks English, she doesn't have a profession, she has an education, she can read and write. It's listing that Mary Peck owns the house, not Anna Burt at this time. So this is interesting stuff for 1910. And we keep doing this backwards and backwards and backwards. Our next one is we go to 1900. We're looking up to see if we can find the same information. Where did she go? Here we go. So in 1910, and it's interesting how it seems to switch hands. Now it's listing Anna Burt as the owner of St. George Street, number 143. But here we have our two aunts again. Now we have Rebecca Peck and Mary Peck. So since we have two women listed as aunts with the same surname, again, this is a fairly good bet that this is from her mother's side. Here in the 1900 census, it lists specifically that Anna was born in May 1850. So it gives us a very precise month and date of birth, or year of birth. So this is what I'm putting in. She was born in May 1850. And that does match up with what we've been finding so far. So I'm going back to my different forms. I'm putting in all of the dates. May 1850. And here, May 1850. Now, what we are also taking a look at this, since we've got confirmation now on 2 different censuses that about her aunts. I lost track of where I was. It'll be interesting to see where her aunts were born. Now look, both of her aunts were born in New York, and Anna's mother was born in New York. So this is matching up pretty good. Again, it's not conclusive, but it's a great hint. So if these women, excuse me, are sisters, that means the parents of Rebecca or Mary very well might be the parents of Anna's mother. So Rebecca's father was born in Connecticut and Rebecca's mother was born in Connecticut. So there is an enormously good possibility that Anna's maternal grandparents might have been born in Connecticut. So number 1 is Anna, number 3 is her mother, 6 and 7 are her mother's parents. So her grandfather, I'm putting this in question marks because I'm not sure, might have been born in Connecticut. And sometimes I can't spell Connecticut, so pardon me if that's not it. And her grandmother might have also born, maybe there's a C in there? There's no spell check in PDFs. Might have also been in Connecticut. We're doing some question marks in there. These are clues that might help us later, and we're putting them in question marks because they might be wrong clues. We don't want to pigeonhole ourselves right away. What's also interesting in the 1900 census, it's showing us that Anna's father was born in Virginia. So Virginia, Vermont, they're both V states. It's entirely possible that the person who is writing this down wrote it down wrong. And it might be that Anna, Rebecca, or Mary might not have been the people giving the information. Or maybe Mary gave the information to the person who was writing it and she got Virginia and Vermont mixed up. But either way, we have a question here. Was her father born in Virginia or Vermont? We're going to need to look at some more censuses and find some other information to find out 100%. And this one cracks me up. Her occupation is a capitalist. Huh. So we're doing this again for all of the other censuses. We're going back further and further. We are going back to compare to find out what other censuses there are for her. So we should be finding 1895 and some others. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing your research, 1890 census records burned up in a fire. There's only fragments that are left. So if you can't find anybody in 1890, don't be sad. Most of us can't either. Here's an example of a Florida state census that I found her in 1850. And this is where things start to get very interesting for the research. Here's Anna Burt listed as a daughter of the head of household. Head of household, the father, is George Burt. And we see another sibling here, another daughter, Lucy Burt. So we're starting to get some more clues. The younger that Anna is getting, we're starting to see some more family members. So I see George Burt as her father. So I'm going back. And I'm adding all of these things in because these are additional people that I want to research. And I see a sister, Lucy Burt. Whoops. And so I'm going back to this one as well. And we're typing in George Burt. And also from this 1885 census, we're getting how old they are. So here, George Burt was 67 in 1885. Let's get out the calculator. 1885 minus 67. He was born approximately 1818. So I'm putting about 1818. And over here, about 1818. And similarly for Lucy, the sister, where did she go? She was 20, that looks like 20 years old in 1885. So that means she was born approximately 1865. So I'm going to do about 1865. So you'll see each different census tracks different information, gives you different clues, and you just have to take note of each of them in order to start getting some of those clues coming up. So we're running out of time, and I can't show you all of the terribly exciting ones. I will show you, though, the last one that I found her in. And this one, let's see here, was it this one, and the 1850 census. So we know she was born in May of 1850, so I wasn't holding out any hope at all to find her in that census, also because they tended to do theirs in April. I mean, that seemed to be like the census month, but as it happens, the 1850 census was done in October of 1850, which means we were very lucky to find Anna here listed with both of her parents. Here we have George Burt, and it shows her mother. At first I thought, was this her sister Lucy? But no, then you look at the age, 25 years old. It's just George, Lucy, Anna, and we see Anna here with her age being 2 of 12. That means that she was 2 months old, 2 out of 12, 2 months old. The math doesn't quite add up right. If this was done in October and she was done in May, she should have been a little bit older. But I always love seeing people there as infants during their first year when they show up in the census. I get chills. Call me a little bit of a census nerd, but it makes me happy to find these people. So we've tracked Anna her entire life in the federal censuses from 1850 until 1930. And that's just one example of how you can go ahead and sort of build a tree and find different clues. So the next step after this, I would be looking for, actually let me go ahead and put her mom in here really quick. The frustrating part is we don't know from these records what Lucy's last name is. It might be Peck, it might not be. I need to find some other records. These are my clues that I need to find some other records to substantiate what I'm finding. But yeah, census records. I am showing that we don't have any questions as of yet. Feel free to reach out to your local librarians. We're happy to ask or happy to help you with your questions. Again, we have the Ask a Librarian feature where you can chat with us. And let me go ahead and start closing up then. This was a lot of fun, guys. I enjoy doing genealogy, and I love sharing the information with you. Let me show you a sticker that a friend sent me that I love. I also love census data because you never know what you're going to find in there. There's all sorts of fantastic clues. And let me pop up one more screen up here. There we go. So thank you guys. Special thanks to Margaret, who's been helping behind the scenes. She has been fantastic. I appreciate you a lot, Margaret. Thank you. And if you ever have any questions, type them in the chat box. We'll follow up. This will be archived on YouTube, so you can watch it later on if you missed it today. I will be here next Friday at 3 o'clock, Facebook Live. We're going to be talking about the Reference USA database. Fantastic for small business owners at this time if you're trying to bring back your clientele. I will show you how you can create your own direct mail address list for free with your library card. There's a whole bunch of different parameters we can use. I'm going to show you how to do it either by maybe radius around the building. Maybe you want within a mile of your store, you want to reach out to local residents to welcome them back. Or maybe you want to go ahead and send out coupons to healthcare providers as a thank you. Or so we can look up different industries and how to reach out to specific types of other businesses if you want to send them something in the mail. We're here every weekday at 3 o'clock. Monday through Friday, Facebook Live is when we do our different adult events. And that's pretty much it. Have a fantastic weekend, you all, and I will see you next Friday. So, bye.